Hello folks. So in the last video, I got as far as adding in bullets so that I can actually shoot from this castle out. So now what I need to do is add in some enemies to shoot at. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. Now before I can create the enemies, I need to load in their images. So I'm going to come underneath here where I've got my bullet images and start loading in the enemies. We'll say load enemies. And my enemy images are within a subfolder here. So I've got my IMG folder, within there's enemies, and then there's a folder for knight, which is just one of the enemy types, and that's got folders for attack, death, and walk animations. So if I go into one of these, you can see there's different animations or different still images here. And the idea is that I'm just going to load all of them in, and then just quickly flick through them one by one, and that's going to simulate an animation. So it's just going to be a bunch of still images, but by going through them really quickly, it's going to look like the enemies are, well, they're animated. So that means that first of all, I need to load in all of these images for all the different types of animations for the different types of enemies. I know I've only got a knight in here for now, but I'll add some more as I go along. So to do that, I need to use a bunch of different loops. So first of all, we'll start off with an empty list. So I'll call this enemy underscore animations, and this list is going to house all of the different images and all the different animations for each enemy within it. The other thing I want to define is my enemy types. So again, this is going to be a list, and for now it's only going to have the knight. That's the only enemy I want to start off with, but I will add on to it as I go. The other thing I want to have is enemy underscore health. So this isn't important for images, but it will be important for when I create the enemies. I want them to all have different health so that they take different amounts of shot to kill. So the knight's going to have 75 health. Now the next thing I need to do is define all the different animations that I have. So here I've got attack, death, and walk. So I need to name all of these out again in another list. Animation underscore types equals, and I'll do them in order that I want to actually have them on the screen. So first of all, the enemies are all going to walk, then they're going to reach the castle and attack it, but if they get killed on the way, then I want a death animation. Notice the important thing here is all of these are tying in with the names in the folders, and this is deliberate. So I have my knight, which is the knight folder, and then within there I've got attack, walk, and death. So this is going to allow me to load in the images from the correct folders as well. So now I can actually start going through the images one by one. So first of all, I want to work through my enemy types. So I want to start with one enemy, load in all of its images, move on to the next enemy, and so on. I'll say for enemy in enemy underscore types. So of course for now, because there is only one item within this list, it's just going to see enemy is knight, and then it's going to run through all of the images for it. Then I'll add a comment here to say load animation. And now I need to start loading each of these individual images to store within some kind of location. So if I'm loading in all the images for the walk animation from here, well, I'm going to have a whole bunch of them loaded in. A good place to store them is another list. So there's going to be a whole bunch of lists used here. So I'm going to say animation underscore list is equal to an empty list. Now I do have a separate video that goes into a lot of detail on how to do these kind of sprite animations. So if I'm going a little bit quick here, if it's not making sense, I'll put a link up to it and you can check that out separately. So I've got my animation list, which is a blank list for now. Now I need to do another loop. So this one is for animation in animation types. So remember, first of all, I'm iterating through each of the enemies. And then within that enemy, I'm iterating through each of the different types of animations that they might have. So first of all, that's going to go through walk, then attack, and then death within this loop. And now I need one more list. So this last list is going to just be a temporary one. So I'll say reset temporary list of images. I'll say temp underscore list is a blank list again. And then I define the number of frames in each animation list. So here you can see I go from 0 up to 19. So that means there's 20 frames within each animation. So I say num of frames equals 20. And now I can go through each of these ones with another for loop. I can say for I in range number of frames. So that's going to be from 0 to 19, because if you put in a range here of 20, it always goes up to, but not including that number. So it'll go 0 to 19, which is exactly what I've got within this folder. And then I want to load in each of these images one by one. So I can say img equals pygame.image.load. And then this is where the tricky part comes in. So I need to be able to use all of these different variables from these for loops to load in the particular image. So this is where Python's string formatting comes in and where a lot of errors come up. Now, if you're getting errors with this, then it may be that you're not using the latest version of Python. String formatting with the method I'm using here is not available in some of the older versions. Essentially, what I'm going to do here is type in the path of my images. So remember the code, if I go back up, my code is here, and then there's a subfolder called img. So to access anything within there, I type img /, then I go into my next set of folders, which is my enemies folder. So I type in enemies in here, but then after that, at the moment I have night, but I don't want to specify night in here because then it's only going to restrict me to that one animation. What I actually want to do is work through my enemy types. So that is this variable here. So in each iteration of the loop, this enemy variable is going to change from knight to goblin to whatever other enemies I have. So I actually want to have a / here, but then I want this enemy variable to be put in. So to do that, I can use Python string formatting. I put curly bracket instead, and I put enemy in here. But to make this work, I need to come right to the beginning before I've got my first quotation mark and put an F here. So now you notice it changed. Essentially now it's going to tell Python to take that variable and put it into this string path. So that gets me as far as my particular enemy folder, but then I need to go into each of the individual animations. So again, this is what's controlling which animation I'm in at the moment. That means that my next folder is going to be that variable, which is animation. So that means that at the first iteration, this is going to be night. So that variable is going to be, oh, I've done this wrong already. I need to get rid of that. So it's going to be image enemies night. And then the first animation is walk. So then once this is complete, it's going to move on to the next one, which is attack, and it's going to repeat the process for me. So it just saves me having to all manually type in all of these different animations. And then lastly, I need to load in each image individually. So this is where this last for loop comes in. So this I variable is going to go from 0 to 19, and that's what I want to add in here as my last step. So I put in I in here. That means that I'm loading in at this point. I am in my night / walk animation, and then I'm loading in from 0 up to 19, each of those images one by one. So I just need to make sure I add .png at the end and then convert alpha. So now that this image is loaded in, remember I was saying that all of these pictures are pretty massive, so I want to scale them down. So first of all, as soon as I've loaded it, I want to get its width and height. So I can say e_w equals which is it, img.get_width, and then e_h equals img.get_height. And now I can scale the images. So I can reassign that image variable, and this time I can say pygame.transform.scale, and I'll take the original image that I just loaded in, img, then for the sizes, well, the width is going to be the integer value of the existing width multiplied by 0.2. And then the height is going to be the integer value of e_h multiplied by 0.2. So it's possible that I messed up my brackets here again, but we'll find out soon enough. So now that this image is loaded in, remember this for loop is just going to keep running through itself from 0 to 19. So every time it does that, it loads in the next image and overrides this variable. Well, I need to store these variables somewhere. I need to actually be putting these pictures into memory. Otherwise, at the end of this loop, I'm just going to have this image, which is just the last one I loaded. All the ones before it are going to disappear. That is why I created that temporary list. So that means that I can say temp_list.append img. So that temporary list at the end of this for loop is going to house all of the individual images within this folder that I'm in at that point. So those images don't get lost. And then when that for loop is finished, we go back one indent into this middle for loop. And now I've got a temp list. That temp list houses all of the images for one particular animation, be it attack, death, or walk. So that means that I can add that. Again, I'll use my next list, animation_list.append temp list. So it's going to get a little bit complicated now because I do it one more time. I say enemy animations, which is the overall master list for all of the animations, .append animation_list. Okay, so that's probably quite confusing, but essentially what's happening is at the first iteration, I'm going through enemy in enemy types, which is this list here. So it just takes night. So this variable becomes night. Then this variable becomes walk initially. I come in here and I iterate 20 times. So then I tell PyGame to go into this folder here, which will be img enemies, and then at the first iteration it's going to be night, animation is going to be walk, and then I is going to go from 0 to 19. I'm going to load all of these images in, store them in this temporary list. Then once they're all in together, this temporary list is complete, I put them into this bigger animation list. Then I repeat that process for the next type of animation, which is going to be attack, and then I add that again to this animation list. Then I repeat it again for death, add that to the animation list. So when all of this is done, this animation list here contains all of the 20 images for walk, for attack, and for death. So when that's all complete, I go into this master animation list and put that into it. So then this whole process will repeat for the next enemy, and then enemy animations is going to get the next one and the next one. So this is what's going to house the animations for each individual enemy. Okay, I think that's enough explanation about loading in these images. Let's first of all run this and see if it kicks up any errors. It's loading okay, so I must have got the brackets right. So it's loaded in all of those images and stored them in memory. But now, of course, I need to actually do something with them. So this is where my classes are going to come in again. I'll create an enemy class. But rather than creating it within this main code that I've got, I'm going to create another Python script here. I've called it enemy.py. And if I close all these folders, I've saved it in the same location as the main code. So this is the code that I'm working with at the moment, and enemy.py is in the same folder. So it means that I'm going to be able to import the code from it. So I'll start off within this one. I need to import PyGame because I will be accessing some PyGame commands and functions within this enemy.py script here. And I'll create my enemy class. So class enemy, I'm going to use this as a Sprite class. So that means that I need to do the same thing that I did with the bullets and inherit from PyGame's built-in Sprite class. I'm mainly doing this just so I can get the self.kill function. So then I start off with a constructor, and then I start putting in the arguments. So each enemy is going to have a different health. Remember, that's what this list was all about here. So although at the moment it only has 75, I will populate that with more as I add more enemies, and that's what this variable is going to control. Then I need the animation list for that particular enemy. So again, I've loaded in all of these animations. I'm going to pass them into this class when I create an enemy, and it's going to know which images to take from that. Then I need coordinates, X and Y, and lastly, a speed. So now, well, I need to remember this again, pygame.sprite.sprite. So I need to add in the constructor from the PyGame Sprite class, just to make sure that I inherit all the functionality from it. And now I can start assigning my variables. Now the first one I want to assign is not actually a variable that you feed in as an argument, it's a self.alive variable. So I'll set this to true, and I want this to be true for every enemy when they're first initialized and when they're first constructed. It just means that the class or that instance is going to be considered alive, and then I can track its health, and I can set this to false as soon as the enemy is killed. So that's going to be an easy way for me to track which enemy is alive and which one is dead. Next, I can start assigning the variables. So self.speed equals speed, self.health equals health. And then I need a few variables for the actual animations. So I'll say self.animation underscore list equals animation list. Self.frame index, and I'll explain this one. I'll add it in for now, but I'll explain it when I actually come to use it because it'll make a bit more sense. Is equal to 0. Self.action is equal to 0. And then self.update underscore time is equal to pygame.time.get underscore ticks. So essentially this variable here just registers, it takes a timestamp of when this is initially created. And from that I can tell how much time has passed since this enemy was first created, and I can control the animations that way. The next thing I need to do is assign an image to this. Remember, these classes, especially the sprite classes, well, they need an image, otherwise I have nothing to put onto the screen. So although I've loaded in this animation list, I need some kind of self.image and a rectangle from it so I can position it. So I'll say select starting image, and self.image is going to be equal to, well, I've passed in an entire list, so how do I get an image from it? Well, remember, this list contained sublists within it, and those sublists corresponded to the type of action that the enemy is doing, so that's where this variable comes in, and the action is going to be either walk, attack, or die. So that means that I can access this if I take my animation list, self.animation underscore list. If I go into that list, the first index is going to allow me to access the particular type of animation. So self.action, this is what's going to say whether they're walking, attacking, or dying. And then from those animations, I need to know which frame I'm in. So if I go back here, this is going to be frame 0 all the way up to frame 19. Well, when they first created, I wanted to start in this position. So it's the very first image that they start with. So then I just say self.frame index. And as the animation goes on, this frame index is going to increase one by one. And that's what's going to load in the subsequent images, and it's going to update the images to look like an animation. But to start with, when I first create them, I just wanted to take the very first image from an action of 0, which is the walking animation. Now with that done, I can create the rectangle for it. For now, I will just say self.image dot get under, no, that's not right. Have I done this right? Yeah, that is right. Okay, so that's almost everything for the constructor, for now anyway. I'll come back and build it up a bit more. Now the other method that I want to add in is an update method. So we'll say update self, and now I also need to add in a surface argument. So we'll go down here, and for now all I want to do is just display this. I just want to print this onto the screen. So I can say, now normally I would have said screen.blit because in my main code my display window is called screen, but this is separate code. There is no display window here. This is why I've got this argument here. So I'm going to pass my screen from the main code into this instance and into this method, and then I'll be able to blit onto it. So I can say surface.blit, and it's self.image, and the location is self.rect. Okay, so now that should be everything I need for now, and I'll be able to go back into my main code, import this enemy class. So let's save this, or rather import this enemy module, create an instance of the enemy class, and update it to show it onto the screen. So we'll go back up to the top, and I can say import, import enemy. Actually, to make it a little bit easier, I'll say from enemy, because I only have one class within that anyway, so I can say from enemy import enemy. So what I'm saying is from that Python code, from that module, import the enemy class. So now that's done, I'll be able to create instances of this class. Now I want these to be automatically generated within the game loop, but for now, just to try and demonstrate it and get something on the screen, I will just do a temporary area here. Well, I'll create enemies. So I can say enemy, enemy1 equals enemy, which is the name of the class. Now we need to start giving it the arguments. So the arguments are health, animation list, XY, and speed. Now the health, remember, go all the way back up. I've got this list here. So enemy health is a list. At the moment, it's only got one index or one value. Enemy types is here, and animation types is here. So I can start accessing all those lists when I create the instance. So the first thing I needed was the enemy health. So I can access that list, enemy health, and it's going to be index 0 because there was only one value in there. Then the enemy animations are also going to be index 0. And the x coordinate, I will say 200. And for the y coordinate, let's put it to the bottom of the screen. So screen height minus 100. And lastly, for the scale, I'll just put 1. I'm not sure if these ones are massive or not. Oh no, of course, because I've already scaled them down. So I don't actually need that. Yeah, I don't really need that argument. I can get rid of that. And I can get rid of that from the code. Ah, it's not scale, it's speed. That's why I'm getting confused. Okay, so we'll put speed back in. And now that I've created it, I need to add it into a group. So just like I did with the bullets, I'll create a group. I'll create that above here, so I'll keep all the groups together. You can say enemy underscore group equals pygame.sprite.group. Okay, and now that this one is created, I can add it to that group. I can say enemy underscore group.add enemy underscore 1. All right, now let's just run this before I go too much further and see. Okay, seems to be okay for now. The instance is obviously created, but because I'm not calling the update method, it's not coming up on the screen. Notice that I'm not calling this draw. The reason I'm doing this, I guess at the moment it doesn't matter, but it will become a little bit clearer later. Basically, because like I said earlier, these groups have built-in update and draw methods. I can override the update method, but I can't override the draw method. And I don't want. I'm going to be changing this blit function a bit later on to customize it a little bit. So I need to keep it within my update method. If I put it in the draw method, PyGame's just going to ignore it, and it's just going to blit them onto the screen at the rectangle position anyway. So now that I've got this, I can come down here. I've got my castle, my bullets. So I can get rid of this line. I don't need that anymore. And I can add in another comment here, draw enemies. So this is going to be my enemy underscore group dot update. And remember that took an argument, which is my display window, so it knows where to draw it. And I'm put that in as a screen. Okay, so whenever I do this much typing without running, I'm always a bit concerned. So let's run this, see what happens. Okay, it kind of worked, but for some reason he's all the way on the top left. He should be somewhere down here, so I'm not sure why. So I've done something partially wrong, but we're mostly there. Screen height minus 100 for the y coordinate. So why is he not coming up all the way up there? Oh, okay, because I haven't assigned any values to it. Okay, so I went a little bit too fast and missed a step. So if we come back into the enemy.py code and this enemy class, I've got this section where I was loading in the image and I got a rectangle from it. Well, that rectangle now needs positions. I'm putting in an x and y argument, but I never actually did anything with it. So I can say self.rect.center is equal to x and y. So let's go back and run that again. And there we go. He's coming up pretty much at the right position, exactly where I want the enemy to come up. So that's worked pretty well. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do in this video is to actually add in an animation. At the moment, the images is just loading in, and I know that I've loaded all the images there, but it's not going through them. It's just a still image here. And I've kind of done all the hard work for it, so it should be easy enough to add in the animation code. Now I've got this update method within my enemy script. I will keep that as it is because it is going to grow a little bit over time, and I'll just create another method called update underscore animation. This doesn't take any arguments, so I'll just say self. And what I will actually do is I will call that method from my update method. So add a little comment here just to make it a bit clearer. So draw image on screen, and above it I will call that update method. So we'll say self.update underscore animation. So now I don't need to call this from my main game loop. The update method itself, it knows to take care of this. So it's going to update the animation and it's going to print the correct image onto the screen. So the way these animations are going to work, like I explained, I just have a bunch of still images and I need to flick through them really quickly. So first of all, I need to define how quickly. So let's say, first of all, a comment, update animation, and then I want to set, in fact, that's kind of obvious that's what that is. Let's say define animation cooldown. Yeah, animation cooldown. And I'll define a variable here, animation underscore cooldown equals 50. And this is going to be, well, variable is just an integer, but the way I'm going to be using this 50, it means milliseconds. So that's how many milliseconds is going to pass before it moves on to the next animation step. And that means that you can adjust this variable to either increase or decrease the speed of your enemy's animations. Now I want to say update image depending on current action. So notice that's actually going to be exactly the same as what I've got going on up here when I first create the enemy. So I can just copy that down here, except in this case, these variables can and will be changing. So what I want to do with this animation method is, first of all, assign the latest image out of whatever the enemy is doing at that time and how far they are within that action. So that is going to control my self.image and it's going to keep it always up to date. The next thing I want to do is check how long has passed since the last time the frames were updated. So I'll add a comment to say, check if enough time has passed since the last update. So to do that, I first of all check what time it is currently. I say pygame.time.get_ticks. And remember, when I created this instance previously, I took a timestamp at the creation point. So I already have this variable called self.updateTime. So I can say if the current time minus self.updateTime, which is the last time I was updated, if that time exceeds this cooldown variable that I've set here, i.e. if 50 milliseconds have passed since then, animation cooldown, well then that means that I've stayed within that frame long enough, so I want to move on to the next frame within the animation. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I update that variable, that update time, because it's now just about to get updated. Therefore, the update time for the new animation is the current time. pygame.time.get_ticks. So we'll refresh that and essentially just reset the timer. And at the same time, we move on to the next frame. So I say frame index is increased by 1. So frame index is just these images here. So basically it's just moving on to the next one in the sequence. So let's try and run this now. Let's see what happens. And you can see it's animating. For a short period of time, it animated before it kicked me out with an error. I'll run it again just to show you. There you go. You can kind of see the enemy is doing a little walking animation. But why am I getting this error at the end? Well, what's happening within the code here is that I'm increasing this frame index by 1 in fact, let's slow this down a bit to make it a bit clearer. So now you see what's going on a bit better. It's going through each of the individual stills. The animation looks really jittery because it's just too slow right now. And then it gets to the end of it and it crashes. And the reason for that is it just keeps increasing this frame index. So once it gets to the last animation, which is number 19, this image here, it tries to increase it one more time. It goes to 20, it goes into my list of animations, which is this one here, and it tries to access the 20th frame within this index. Well, that doesn't exist. That's where the animation ends, so that's why it kicks me out with an error. What I actually need to be doing at that point, because I've reached the end of that animation, I want to set it back to the start. So I need to take this frame index and I need to reset it back to 0 when it gets above that maximum point. So let's add a little check for that here. If the animation has run out, then reset back to the start. Okay, so I can just say if self.frameIndex, because remember I've just increased it. So I've just increased that frame index, but I'm not updating the image until the next iteration of the loop, because this is done first. So this gives me a chance to catch that error. So if that frame index at this point has gone beyond the length, then I need to reset it. So I can say if that has gone greater than or equal to the length of self.animation list self.action. So if this has gone beyond the number of frames that are contained within that animation action, well, then we'll just reset it back to 0. Self.frame_index is 0. So we'll just start again. Go back to the main game, run that again. And there we go. He's just doing a little shuffle in position. But you can see now it's a lot smoother, and it's just going through that same animation over and over. What I could actually do just to demonstrate what the different actions do. Remember this variable here, self.action, this corresponds to what the enemy is doing at the time. So if I set this to 1, go back, run it again, now he's just attacking. Set it to 2. Oops, I'm gonna run this one. And now he falls over and dies. And just keeps getting up, falling over and dying. If I set it to 3, then it will crash because I don't have any more animations beyond that. So that's essentially an explanation of how these actions and frame indices are going to work together to allow me to go through all of the different animation types for these enemies. So I think that's going to do it for this video. In the next one, I'm going to look at actually adding in some AI for these guys. So they're going to start coming along to the castle, and then that's how I'm going to control which animation they go through. So they'll walk until they get here, then they'll attack, and then if I shoot them enough, then they can die, and so on. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. So if you found this useful, then please leave a like and feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching.